Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak on a truth that is often ignored but deeply felt. Silence exposes weakness. We are taught from a young age that silence is golden, that keeping quiet shows patience, wisdom, or maturity. And yes, there are moments where silence is powerful, where it becomes a shield of dignity or a tool for deep reflection. But let us not confuse wise silence with fearful silence. When we stay silent in the face of injustice, when we remain quiet while truth is being buried, when we mute ourselves instead of standing for what is right, that silence does not reflect strength, it exposes weakness. Silence is weakness when a person is bullied and no one dares to speak. It is weakness when corruption spreads but voices tremble instead of rising. It is weakness when someone knows the truth but chooses comfort over courage. History has shown us that empires of oppression did not stand merely because of the strength of tyrants, but because of the silence of the people. Think about it: silence allows wrongs to continue unchallenged. Silence gives power to lies. Silence hides our own fears more than it reflects our strength. A voice, even if small, carries more weight than 1,000 silent hearts. The moment you speak up, you shift from being a bystander to being a force of change. So I urge you, never let your silence become your weakness. If something is unjust, say it. If something is unfair, question it. If something is wrong, challenge it. Because silence may protect you for a moment, but in the end, it exposes that you lack the courage to stand tall. Strength is not measured by how long you endure in silence. Strength is measured by how bravely you raise your voice when it matters most. Silence in the face of injustice empowers. The wrongdoer silence is often mistaken for neutrality, but in reality, it is never neutral. To stay silent in the face of injustice is not to remain uninvolved. It is to stand, knowingly or unknowingly, on the side of the oppressor. When a wrong is committed and no voice rises against it, the wrongdoer feels validated, encouraged, and even untouchable. Silence is not just the absence of words, it becomes the presence of consent. Think about it. When a bully intimidates someone in a classroom, what gives him confidence to continue? It is not just his strength. It is the silence of those who witness the act and choose not to intervene. Their silence tells the bully, what you are doing is acceptable. Their silence becomes his shield, his permission, his weapon. The same principle applies at every level of society, from family conflicts to workplace harassment, from corruption in institutions to human rights violations across nations. Injustice thrives in silence because silence removes accountability. The wrongdoer feels that no one will question or challenge them, and so they continue, growing bolder each time. The victims, meanwhile, feel abandoned and powerless, not because there are no people around them, but because those people refuse to use their voices. And so silence does not merely protect the guilty, it wounds the innocent. History offers countless examples of this truth. The most painful chapters of humanity, slavery, genocide, discrimination, and systemic oppression were not written by the hands of the guilty alone, but also by the silence of millions who looked away. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." This statement reflects the deep betrayal that silence can cause. It is not always the loud oppressor that causes the most harm. Sometimes it is the quiet onlooker who refuses to stand up for what is right. Injustice is like fire. A single spark can be put out if addressed early, but when everyone watches in silence, the flame spreads uncontrollably. Speaking out is like pouring water on that flame before it consumes everything. Silence, however, is like adding fuel, because it gives the impression that the fire is harmless or invisible. By the time people realize the damage, it is often too late. We must also recognize that silence is often rooted in fear of consequences, fear of standing out, fear of becoming the next target. And yes, speaking against injustice is rarely easy. It requires courage, sacrifice, and sometimes personal risk. But the cost of silence is always greater than the cost of speaking. Silence allows wrongs to grow until they threaten everyone, including those who once thought they could stay safe by staying quiet. Each of us has a responsibility. Our voice, no matter how small, has power. A single person speaking up can inspire others to find their courage. One raised voice can break the atmosphere of silence and spark a movement. When people unite in speech, oppressors lose their strength because injustice cannot survive under the weight of truth spoken loudly. So, let us remember, silence in the face of injustice is not wisdom, it is weakness. It is complicity. It hands power to those who abuse it and leaves the vulnerable unprotected. If we truly wish to live in a just world, we must not close our lips when our conscience demands speech. We must be the voice that interrupts wrong, the sound that cracks through silence, and the strength that empowers truth. Injustice does not fear silence. It feeds on it, but it trembles when voices rise. Silence is often rooted in fear, not wisdom. We live in a world where silence is sometimes praised as maturity, patience, or even strength. And it's true there are moments where silence is wise, such as when listening deeply, avoiding unnecessary conflict, or choosing peace over pointless arguments. But let's be honest, many times the silence we keep is not wisdom at all. It is fear dressed as wisdom. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of losing relationships, jobs, or opportunities. This silence does not make us strong. It exposes weakness. When we know the truth but cannot bring ourselves to say it, fear is in control. Fear tells us, if you speak up, you'll lose something. Fear whispers, stay quiet, it's safer. And so, we convince ourselves that silence is the mature choice, when in reality, it is the comfortable choice. But comfort is not always right, and silence that comes from fear is nothing but a cage we build for ourselves. Think of the times you wanted to speak but stopped yourself. Maybe at school, when you saw someone being mocked but stayed quiet because you didn't want to become the next target. Maybe at work, when your ideas were dismissed, but you held back because you feared your boss's reaction. Maybe in your personal life, when you knew something was wrong, but you swallowed your words because you were afraid of conflict. In each case, silence was not golden, it was a mask hiding your fear. The problem with fear-driven silence is that it allows wrongs to continue and truths to remain hidden. Worse, it erodes our own self-respect. Every time we silence ourselves out of fear, we send a message to our own heart: my voice doesn't matter. Over time, this belief becomes a habit, and that habit becomes weakness. People who constantly silence themselves eventually lose confidence, because they've trained themselves to shrink instead of rise. On the other hand, wisdom-driven silence is entirely different. Wisdom says, this battle isn't worth fighting. Fear says, I can't fight at all. Wisdom says, I'll wait for the right time to speak. Fear says, there will never be a right time. See the difference. Wisdom strengthens you, but fear weakens you. One empowers you with control, while the other chains you in submission. Fearful silence not only harms us, but also benefits those who take advantage of it. Abusers, manipulators, and oppressors count on silence to protect them. They thrive on the fact that fear keeps people quiet. The moment someone breaks that silence, their power begins to crack. That is why silence born of fear is so dangerous. It doesn't just weaken us. It strengthens those who do wrong. Breaking free from fear-driven silence requires courage, but courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to speak even when fear is present. The first time may feel terrifying, but each time you use your voice, you weaken fear's grip on you. Speaking up once makes it easier to speak up again, and slowly your voice becomes stronger than your fear. We must remind ourselves that our words have value, our voice matters, and often the fear of speaking is worse than the consequences themselves. When you dare to speak, you may lose something, yes, but when you stay silent, you lose yourself. And losing yourself is the greatest weakness of all, so let's not confuse fear with wisdom. Let's not call our silence strength when it is only hiding our insecurity. True strength is found in speaking when it matters, in using your voice even if it shakes, and in choosing courage over comfort. Silence rooted in wisdom builds peace. Silence rooted in fear builds weakness. And when fear controls our voice, it controls our life. History proves silence sustains oppression. If there is one lesson history has repeatedly taught us, it is this: oppression does not survive because oppressors are too strong. It survives because the majority remains silent. Silence, more than swords or weapons, has been the fuel that allows injustice to thrive generation after generation. When we study the darkest chapters of history, we often ask, how could this happen? How could human beings allow such cruelty, such injustice, such destruction? And the answer is always the same: because too many people stayed quiet. They chose safety over courage, comfort over conscience, and silence over truth. Think of slavery. Millions were chained, bought, and sold like objects. Did it happen because a small group of oppressors were invincible? No. It happened because the majority of society looked away. They chose silence, convincing themselves it was normal, or worse, not their problem. Their silence gave slavery legitimacy until a few courageous voices finally broke it. Think of the Holocaust, one of humanity's greatest tragedies. While evil leaders orchestrated horrific crimes, millions of ordinary people stood by silently. Some feared for their lives, others chose indifference, but in the end, their silence allowed genocide to continue. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, once said, "Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." This statement reminds us that silence does not protect the weak. It empowers the strong. Think of apartheid in South Africa, racial segregation in America, or colonial rule across nations. Oppression continued not only because rulers held power, but because the voices of the people were muffled by fear. The turning point in each of these cases came when silence was broken, when individuals and movements dared to speak out. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, they were not superhuman. They were individuals who refused silence. Their voices inspired millions to find courage, and their courage shattered systems that once seemed unbreakable. History makes it clear: silence is never neutral. Silence always takes the side of the oppressor. To stay silent in the face of injustice is to vote in favor of it. Every act of silence is a small piece of support that helps oppression stand taller. But what about today? Are we free from such silence? Sadly, no. Even in modern times, silence sustains oppression. Corruption continues in governments because citizens stay silent out of fear or hopelessness. Domestic abuse continues in households because neighbors choose silence rather than involvement. Discrimination, exploitation, and injustice thrive in workplaces, schools, and communities not only because of those who commit them, but because of those who witness them and stay quiet. We must understand that silence has a cost. It is not harmless. When we do not speak, we allow suffering to grow. When we refuse to raise our voices, we delay justice, and history will judge not only those who did wrong, but also those who stood by in silence. The good news is that history also proves the power of breaking silence. Every great change, every revolution, every victory of justice began when someone spoke. It never began with silence. One voice has the power to ignite thousands. One act of courage can shatter decades of fear, and once silence is broken, oppression begins to crumble. So, let us not repeat history's mistake. Let us not stand silently while injustice unfolds before us. Because silence is not innocence. Silence is participation. It is the quiet partner of oppression, the invisible hand that holds victims down. History has already proven what silence can do. The question is, will we learn from it? A voice, even if small, is stronger than silence. There is a common belief that one voice is too small to make a difference. Many people remain silent, not because they agree with injustice, but because they feel their words won't matter. They tell themselves, "What can I possibly change?" But the truth is, one voice, even if it seems small, carries more power than 1,000 silent hearts. Silence may feel safe, but it is powerless. It changes nothing. A voice, on the other hand, has the potential to shake systems, inspire courage, and give life to hope. History, society, and even personal experiences prove that transformation never begins with silence. It always begins with a single voice that dares to speak. Think about leaders and change makers who altered the course of history. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream began as one man's voice, yet it awakened millions. Malala Yousafzai, just a young girl from Pakistan, raised her voice for education, and today she is a global symbol of courage. Greta Thunberg, a teenager, decided not to remain silent about climate change, and her voice sparked a worldwide movement. None of these voices were initially loud or powerful. They were simply brave enough to break silence. The power of a voice lies not in its volume, but in its courage. A whisper of truth is louder than a roar of lies. A trembling statement of justice is stronger than the silence of a crowd. When someone speaks up, even if their words are imperfect, it creates a ripple effect. It tells others, you are not alone, you can speak too. And that chain reaction has the ability to change families, communities, and entire nations. On the other hand, silence keeps everything the same. If one person chooses silence, nothing happens. If 100 people choose silence, nothing happens. But if one person speaks, the silence of 100 can begin to break. That's the beauty of a voice, it multiplies. Courage is contagious. Every time one person uses their voice, it gives permission for others to do the same. We often underestimate the power of words. Words have ended wars and started revolutions. Words have healed wounds and exposed lies. Words have given strength to the weak and fear to the oppressor. Silence can never achieve this. Silence only protects the status quo, while words challenge it. Even in our personal lives, a voice is stronger than silence. How many relationships are broken, not because of too many words, but because of silence, unspoken feelings, hidden truths, bottled pain? A single, honest conversation can heal what silence has destroyed. Speaking our truth, even softly, can mend what silence has broken. The world does not need perfect voices. It needs brave ones. You don't need to be famous, powerful, or influential to make an impact. You only need the courage to speak when others are quiet. Your voice might not change the world instantly, but it can change the moment. It can protect someone, inspire someone, or expose something that was hidden. And that single act is far stronger than all the silence that came before it. So let us stop underestimating ourselves. A small voice is not weak, it is a spark. Silence is emptiness, but a voice is possibility. Even if your words shake, even if your message is short, even if you are the only one speaking, remember this: your voice matters, because one voice, no matter how small, is always stronger than silence. True strength lies in courage to speak for centuries. People have misunderstood strength. Many think strength is about how much you can endure quietly, how long you can carry pain without saying a word, or how well you can suppress your emotions. But this is not true strength. True strength lies not in silence, but in the courage to speak. It takes little effort to stay quiet when something is wrong. Silence is easy. Silence does not risk rejection, confrontation, or conflict. Silence does not require us to step into the fire, but courage does. To open your mouth when others expect you to keep it shut. To speak truth in a world that punishes honesty, that is real strength. Why is speaking such a powerful act? Because words carry responsibility. When you speak, you reveal where you stand. You declare your values, your beliefs, your courage. And once you have spoken, you cannot hide. That is why so many people avoid it. They fear exposure. But it is precisely this vulnerability that makes speech powerful. It shows strength not only to others but to ourselves. True strength is not in holding back feelings of injustice, but in expressing them, even if your voice trembles. It is in confronting a bully, calling out corruption, challenging unfair systems, or simply saying this is not right. Each of these actions requires courage because they carry consequences, yet every time we choose courage over silence, we grow stronger. History honors those who spoke, not those who remained silent. We remember the leaders, writers, activists, and everyday people who dared to raise their voices when silence was safer. Their courage to speak changed laws, broke chains, and inspired generations. Imagine if they had chosen silence. Imagine if they had decided to keep peace instead of risking their voice. The world we live in today would look very different and far less free. Even in our personal lives, courage to speak defines strength. Many relationships collapse under silence, not because love disappears, but because truth is buried. Real strength is telling someone how you feel, even if it risks discomfort. Real strength is admitting your mistakes, apologizing, or saying the words, "I need help." These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of bravery because they demand honesty, vulnerability, and courage. The irony is that people often stay silent to appear strong. They think silence makes them look composed, untouchable, or wise. But silence rooted in fear is not strength, it is weakness in disguise. True wisdom is knowing when silence is powerful, but true strength is knowing when silence becomes cowardice. And that line is crossed the moment silence protects wrong instead of truth. The courage to speak does not always mean shouting from rooftops or leading crowds. Sometimes it is as simple as standing up for yourself in a conversation, defending someone who cannot defend themselves, or voicing an unpopular opinion because it's the right one. Each act of speaking takes strength, no matter how small it seems. We must remember that courage is not the absence of fear, it is action despite fear. Strength is not about being fearless. It is about using your voice even when fear tells you not to. Silence may keep you safe for a moment, but courage to speak makes you strong for a lifetime. So, if you wish to measure your strength, don't count how many times you stayed silent. Count the times you spoke when it mattered. Because true strength is not found in hiding, but in showing up, not in silence, but in speech, not in fear, but in courage. True strength lies in the courage to speak. And when you choose courage, you choose power, dignity, and freedom not only for yourself, but for those who cannot yet find my friends. Throughout history and within our own lives, one truth remains clear: silence is never neutral. It either strengthens justice or strengthens injustice. It either reveals courage or exposes weakness. We have seen how silence in the face of injustice empowers the wrongdoer, how silence is often rooted not in wisdom but in fear, how history proves that oppression survives on the quiet compliance of the majority, how even the smallest voice carries more strength than the loudest silence, and how true strength lies in the courage to speak. Silence may feel safe, but it does not build a better world. It protects the oppressor, not the victim. It hides truth instead of setting it free, and it weakens us from within, convincing us that our voice does not matter. But the truth is, every voice matters. Your voice matters. So let us never allow our silence to expose weakness. Let us speak even if our voices tremble. Let us speak even if we stand alone. Because silence may keep us comfortable for a moment, but courage to speak creates change that lasts for generations. Remember this. Oppression fears only one thing: a voice that refuses silence. Be that voice. Thank you.